Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. So, I've been noticing something more and more amongst the Christian right wing in America, where they always say, third world shithole, something like that. And I began to think about how the hierarchy is in every nation. There's those at the very top, those at the very bottom, middle class, you name it. And when you look at how people can move up and down the sort of hierarchical nature of society, civilization as a whole, you begin to have this path of, are you going to be haughty and arrogant and think you can never fall? Are you going to always be overly ambitious and myopic and trying to climb up that pyramid at any cost, stepping on any head, any neck, as long as you get to excel upwards? Or are you going to be fearful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and recognize that He can humble whomever He wills? Now, for me, I think that it is very important for people to humble themselves and realize how far lower you can get in life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the mighty and sublime. He will guide whomever He wills. And if you're born into a certain socioeconomic status, you have to recognize the fact that if you become super arrogant and think yourself secure, you're going to have a harder fall once Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides to make an example of you. Think about Prophet Job. He had so much restricted from him, right? And he still didn't waver in his faith. A lot of us in America and what we would call the first world, we got struggles. But there are people in India, there are people in Ghana, countless places across the world, pretty much, who have different kinds of struggles. And the pyramid hierarchy in America is like way different than those in other countries. And you can sink so low that you're almost underneath the pyramid. You can really become so destitute that you don't even know what to do. I think about a lot of times how we have to remain in a state of gratitude in order to make sure that if we do end up becoming lower than what we expected in life, that we still recognize that there are those who have it even worse off than us. And that isn't easy to do when you need help, when you need encouragement, when you have to climb up and out and really keep pressing forward. It's easier sometimes to stay stagnant, to think it's too high of a climb. There's all these nuances to our mindset as human beings and how we need to be able to channel endurance and steadfastness and patience in times where we feel pressed, which isn't easy to do. You can be at the top of the pyramid in your own country, and then when you move, you're at the bottom again. You restart. And you would think that with the era of so much migration and whatnot, that people would begin to have more humbleness towards those who have less than them. But it's not always the case. So when you really examine how Andrew Wilson was talking with Brother Daniel Hakikaju, I see someone who is extremely comfortable in their status and doesn't actually think that they could be pushed down so low that they can't even see the top. And that is when you get into some scary situations. Because I think if you always know there's an even lower level for you, you become more sincere in your gratitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I am beginning to notice how so many Americans, especially Christians, are far too comfortable. And they've lost that edge of you're on the precipice, and all it takes is just one accident for you to be at the bottom needing food stamps and EBT and who knows what else, to where you're so destitute that you'll become the very people that you used to mock. There's a lot of folktales as well that deal with that topic. And it reigns true for a reason, because countless people throughout history thought that they were untouchable. They'll never fall. They'll never be broken. And yet, they were. Matt Walsh does it a lot when he had posted about, oh, America can't be the world's soup kitchen, and, you know, these people, they just come as immigrants, they don't contribute anything, they're on welfare programs, there's refugees. And I just kind of thought to myself, how many Americans, when wildfires were happening, they had a hard time finding where they could go, where they could afford. FEMA is not very well funded in America. There's countless of individuals in America who, if an earthquake happened and their home was destroyed, since families are so broken and budgets are so tight, they wouldn't have anywhere to go. And how many of them would have been the types to be on X saying, oh, you know, you're just lazy and you should get a job. And meanwhile, there's tons of people who are working and just need some help from the food bank or something like that. And, man, we have to stay cautious of our own ego, of our own arrogance, and make sure that we're not becoming too flashy and too addicted to prosperity. If you think about people who are just puffed up in the chest, you know, they turn their nose down at the needy, when they find themselves sliding down to the bottom of the pyramid and just dropping on and on and on and on, and there's no end in sight, and they feel like they're in a big hole and they can't get themselves out, who will reach down that far to get them? How many people are forgotten because they're so down, like mentally and physically in the economic ladder, that it's like they don't even exist on the level plane? Sometimes people can be so low in life that they don't even have a position where people can see that they need help. Out of sight, out of mind. And a loss upon one's outlet can make it so that you fall so hard, so deep into the abyss of your own mind that no one can pull you out. So impoverished in a destitute area that no one's coming to rescue you. And so, we must be very cautious of being too comfortable, and we can't assume that we're always going to have it good. And so, when it comes to social safety net programs, I think Americans should take it way more serious. They should be very cautious of assuming that they're always going to have the gravy train going, and that they'll never be one of those widows who needs aid. They'll never be a worker who can't provide properly for his family. It's interesting when you see how many people have made easy money with podcasts, such as Tim Pool and others, and then they get reminded that, hey, the gravy train isn't always going to be in your port. You better be very careful. Very careful. Another angle is just having access to medical care. I think some women, they get too comfortable in the first world where they have emergency rooms that are fully stocked. They have competent specialists, and there are others who don't have that. And I think when some women get to a certain level, they look at trivial things to just put someone down. Whether that be clothing, jewelry, the kind of car you drive, petty things. And pridefulness, is really difficult for people to let go of when they are the ones who slide underneath the pyramid. That's why the hadith that talks about in Riyadh Salihin, Volume 1 and 2, we get to see so many hadiths, and one of them talks about how not scoffing at a gift, even if it's a pair of sheep hooves. And if you recall, in America, pig's feet were pickled pig's feet soup. That was something that the lower classes ate because, you gotta eat something, and it was the part that the upper classes didn't really buy or eat or utilize. You look at Native American tribes and how they used every aspect of the animal, you see something different. You also see a lot of Latino immigrants, they make tamales, and I've bought some that had chicken feet in the middle of the masa for flavor. Also, Chinese immigrants, they make a stew with the chicken feet, and they get collagen from it, they say, and it makes their skin nice. So it's fascinating when you see how people who utilize every aspect of the animal versus those who think they're too good to eat something like that because they've always had the privilege to not eat it, and they never had to discover culinarily how to make something so unpalatable edible, right? So that's something to think about further. And when you look at how on Judgment Day, we're all going to be held accountable for the positions that we were given, really. Were you at the top of the pyramid? How did you earn and spend your money? Were you at the bottom? Did you remain in gratitude? Did you always try to excel? Remember, there are hadiths that talk about don't be the persistent beggar. If you're a persistent beggar and you'd rather not work, right, on the day of judgment, you'll come with less flesh on your face. So there's a balance, a clear balance. Wherever we are, we have to remain in a state of gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which isn't easy, but it just shows you how we're called to have the most highest levels of steadfastness and this stoic nature. And I find that to be remarkable. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can humble any nation. Moses, right, with Pharaoh, it's pretty clear. No matter how high up and advanced you think you are, and how many magicians and numerologists or whatever you think you got in your arsenal on your team, it will not avail you against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So us as Americans or people in what we call first world countries better be cautious. And we better not despise those who have less, because we can easily become that, and then when America falls, like every empire does, who will stick out their hand for us? Look how Americans persecute economic migrants from Mexico and Latin America. How they despise them and treat them, even though they're fellow Christians. We have to be mindful of that as Muslims. Allah, the Mighty and Sublime, is the one who decides which nations rise and fall and when they do. All throughout the earth, there are ruins of past civilizations. No one is immune from economic disasters, and governments are so large that they truly can't prevent the inevitable demise that comes from corruption, licentiousness, pompousness, greed, and everything else that comes with politics. So, we as Americans, especially American Muslims, must do our level best to help our fellows in faith all across the world to be safe, to have knowledge, and to have prosperity, and how they can have patience, whatever it is that we can help in some way, whether it's motivational content, job opportunities, you name it. Just consistently searching and looking for problems to solve and ways to help, ways to advise, to make our community better. So, may we all be upon that path, and may Allah make it easy for us and help us to have patience in our darkest hours when we are so low that we can't even see how we are immensely in the abyss beneath the pyramid. Ameen.